August, but we'll take it.
That's right. Let's last another couple of weeks and we'll be fine.
Yeah.
Got to get some more fishing in, you know.
Yeah. Are you a big fisherman?
I just got my boat and got out there and caught some yesterday. The salmon running.
Yeah?
It's really looking good, yeah.
All right. Well, that's something you can kind of plan on every year, right? Salmon season, the weather, and this kind of being salmon season, I guess.
That's
Coming
right.
from the guy who doesn't fish, I'm going to take your word for it. But some things that are a lot bigger in financial planning, you can't, they're not just coming around every single year, but there are some big items that you see potentially coming down the pipe here.
Right. There are some developments going on. And as a matter of fact, last Thursday was a huge trigger. One of the things that we were anticipating and waiting for with the Fed's decision to go with QE3, it kind of
Code for printing more money.
Yeah, basically. And I thought to myself, now, see, has that happened before in history? And I thought to myself, well, gosh, that almost reminds me of the whole laws of physics. You can only jump so high, and you can't break the laws of physics. Well, there's laws of finance too. That can't be broken. You can play with it for a while, but then after a while, those house cards might fall apart on you, come crashing down. It kind of happened in 2008, as a matter of fact. But let's go back further than that in history and find out what happens when a government decides to print money uncontrollably, unlimited amounts of money. I want to take you back to the Weimar Republic. This was back in the early 1900s, and they had a weak economy, just kind of like our economy is kind of stalled right now. They had high unemployment, and our unemployment rate has been over 8% for the last 3-4 years. It's been up there. The country was rampant with strikes. We've got union strikes going on. They had paramilitary street violence going on. It was crazy. There was a lot of unrest. Right now, we've got gang warfare, we've got drug-related crime, ID theft. We've got cyber crime. It's huge. It had rumors of planned uprisings. Now, in this country, we got Occupy Wall Street going on. It's trying to go global and all that kind of stuff. The political scene was horrible. There was what they called venomous political opposition, just at each other's throat. Well, in this country, we've got political opposition at its peak right now, just before the election, and we've got people attacking character versus dealing with the problems and issues, right? So it's unfortunate. One of the huge things, though, that the Weimar Republic was dealing with was enormous war debt. They were buried in debt from the war, and we are kind of buried in debt as well. You've got to remember, we've got $120 trillion in unfunded liabilities with Social Security, Medicare, and the prescription drug program. That's over $1 million per taxpayer. So we are kind of experiencing enormous debt as well. Different reason, but it's there. We cannot ignore it. It's going to hit us, right? They had war reparations that were demanded by the Allies. At that time, they had to pay back some of the damages done during the war. And there was a lot of pressure for them to do that. Well, as the age wave makes its way through our population, there is going to be a larger and larger demand to get the retirees' share of the Social Security, Medicare, and prescription drug program. It's $120 trillion now. It's growing in exponential amounts. It's going to come due. There's going to be a demand for it, just like there was a demand there. What that did is it accelerated the rate of inflation. They already had high inflation, but it became hyperinflation. So what happened back then in the Weimar Republic is that inflation actually wiped out the savings and pensions of the middle class, completely wiped out, because what happened is they had to take all their savings just to survive, right? Now, in this situation, back in 2008, we saw a huge loss of capital, right? So with the credit crisis, the subsequent stock and the property value crash, basically, a lot of net worth was lost. Different reason, but again, similar situation, right? So back then, what the government did, the Weimar Republic decided to go ahead and print money until it became worthless. This is what reminded me, of what Thursday happened with the Fed saying, okay, we're going to do unlimited printing of money, basically, is what it comes down to. We're going to buy up not only mortgage-backed securities, but U.S. Treasuries and other assets. It's an unlimited amount of spending that the Fed's going to do. Let me just ask you, where are they getting the money? If they're not printing it, where is it coming from? Right? Has anybody audited the Fed? I mean,
they're unauditable, aren't
right?
they?
Yeah. So what I'm saying is the game is up at some point, right? Let me just share with you the speed with which this change can happen. So in 1914, $1 US was worth 4 marks. 6 years later, at the middle of 1920, $1 US was worth 40 marks. 2 years later, actually less than 2 years later, early 1922, $1 US was worth 200 marks. By the next year, early 2000 or 1923, $1 US was worth 18,000 marks, and that same year, by November, $1 US was worth 4.2 trillion marks. It was basically worthless paper. That's how fast it happened. So when it hits the wall, when the economy does start going and we start growing, it's not going to grow fast enough to overcome the $120 trillion unfunded liability. We are so far in the hole, but right now we're adding to that hole. The current debt in the U.S. has already topped $16 trillion, right? That's $5 trillion more than where we were in 2008. It's going to be $20 trillion within the next 2 or 3 years. At the rate that we're overspending, in other words, spending more per year than the tax revenue coming in by more than $1 trillion, plus the compounding interest. Now, that's another thing. Interest rates, as low as they are right now, Fed says part of this program in QE3, going to keep the interest rates low until 2015. That's great for people who want to refinance, both corporations refinancing their bonds, people refinancing their mortgages, municipalities refinancing their municipal debt. It's a great time to be refinancing, getting down to a lower rate, which reduces your cost, which they're hoping is they're going to have more money. People are going to have more money to put back into the economy, right? So they're looking at it as a stimulus, which is okay. If that happens, though, that'll be good. But I'm afraid for when the inflation starts hitting, that we could be in real big, serious trouble.
It's interesting you bring up the, and I don't want to get overly political or anything, but it's interesting you bring up the amount of money that goes in and all these people refinancing. But we had a segment on our show a while back with Ryan Leopold, and we were talking about how who makes all the money during these refinance booms is the big banks. In fact, I don't remember the exact numbers, but the average American will save something like $2 billion during this big refinance boom. The banks will make something along $12 to $16 billion. So it's really interesting. Is there some savings passed down? Yes. Yeah. But one of the problems is some of the big banks, they just have a straw siphoning up anything they can. And so it's really hard for the Fed to get the actual savings down through the bank, because you and I don't borrow from the Fed. Right. We borrow from a bank who charges more money than they borrow it from the Fed from. So it's kind of an interesting piece for them trying to, trickle down, I guess you could say. Sure. What's interesting is that QE1 and QE2, which basically plus the TWIST program, actually they've spent $3 trillion from 2008 till this point now. $3 trillion in quantitative easing. And now it's unlimited from this point forward. So we're going down the track fast, and we're picking up speed, going downhill really quick, okay? The idea is there are some things that you need to do to protect yourself from the future. If we can learn from history what happened, what was the best thing people could do. I've got a list of 3 things that people can do to protect themselves from the inevitable inflation that's going to happen. Now, right now, deflation, there's a whole lot of case for, okay, we're in deflation, but there will be a point where our money becomes worth less and less, and it's going to take more dollars. Look at the cost of gas. Look at the cost of food. They don't include that in the consumer price index, but it's what where we all live, right? So basically, these are the things that you can do. Become debt-free as fast as possible.
And so don't have credit card debt, don't have a car loan, pay down debt if you don't already have, debt. Don't get into it, but even the mortgage, if it's possible. Now, I've recently had some people have to go into like a reverse mortgage situation just because they couldn't afford to not do it. They needed to eliminate their mortgage payment. So that's okay. And even that is a federal government program where we're all going to be sharing the cost of that at some point, right? So number 2, own assets that should benefit from inflation, such as stock in companies that produce necessities. When things get really bad, people give up their wants because they've got to take care of their needs, right? So own the kind of companies that have that are producing those items that people are going to buy no matter what the economy's doing.
Apple.
Well, I'd say that's more of a luxury. But I'm talking about, I'm talking about the things that you
apples.
have to have. There you go. Something that you can eat.
Yeah.
Right. Number 3, I think you need to focus on your needs until you have accumulated sufficient reserves for extended emergencies. Like, for example, if you become unemployed, you need to have money that you can, be self-sustaining for an extended period of time. If you become disabled, you get sick, something goes wrong, you need to have the money, the resources, so that, because if you don't have it, then you've got to use other people's money, right? You've got to get the money from somewhere else. Well, that's what the government does. I mean, that's all they can do. They can only take money from someplace before they can give it someplace else. They don't create money. They just move it around a little bit, right? So what you need to do is be self-sustaining. You need to be financially independent, which means that you are debt-free. You have resources. You don't have to depend on government programs. You don't have to depend on other people. As a matter of fact, you can be benefiting other people and helping them out.
And Glenn, thanks so much for all this. The one thing that and this is kind of, you're looking into a crystal ball, but if it hits the fan that badly, which it could do,
sure.
Does it matter if you're debt free or if it matters that you have, at some point in time, it's like chaos.
Yes.
I mean,
that's right.
Nobody's paying their, so it's, you wonder that at some point,
right.
if it gets as bad as you saying it could,
sure.
doesn't matter.
Well, you're right. At some point, it doesn't matter, but the more prepared you are, the more at ease or peace of mind you have, right?
You still put yourself in the best possible position.
Sure. Like if you own, the cigarettes that somebody else needs or the wine or whatever that somebody else desires, that can be a bartering thing.
I like how your needs just went from apples to cigarettes and wine, Glenn.
Well, you got to think, okay, in bad times, what do people really desire most?
Yeah,
some people.
What's there's an index, right? The vanity index or the sin index or something.
Yes. Yeah.
Booze is up there.
Yeah.
So let's stay away from the drugs, but that is.
We're here with Glen Thiessen. Glenn, we just have a couple minutes left before we do have to go, but so you also talk about focusing on your needs and really making sure that your needs are covered. What do you mean by that?
Well, a lot of times, if a person isn't sure where they want to go or what their goals are, like when I'm going to retire or when I want, maybe change a job or whatever, they're not prepared for the future. And so any advertisement that comes along, they just get off the trail. They see something like, it happens to me all the time. You walk through Costco and, I didn't know I needed that. That stuff happens. But the more you do that, the more of your resources kind of go off the track of where you really want to go in life, right? So knowing what you want out of life and what's really most important to you can kind of help you stay on track. Once you can stay focused like that for long enough to actually create resources, a reserve for yourself to take you through emergencies or even help you retire more comfortably or whatever in the future, you want to become more self-sustaining. So focus on what it is, what you want to accomplish in life, your needs, okay, and take care of those so that way you don't have to be dependent on somebody else, but you can actually be the help to someone else in need. And then, you're a hero instead of
And stay out of Costco and maybe off online shopping. Quit adding things to the shopping cart for later and then accidentally hitting buy. Glenn, we do have to go to break. Thanks so much for joining us. That is Glen Thiessen with Transition Planning, Inc. When we come back, a good friend of ours, Tyler Freed, is going to join us. We're going to talk a little bit more about QE3 and what it may mean for the real estate market. We'll be right back.